You're watching the KUSI News at 5.
The First Step Act was introduced by President Trump and had bipartisan support to promote criminal justice reform. Now, the act was meant to transform federal corrections and the reentry programs. But the question we have, is it working? Is it effective? Here now to talk about the act is attorney and KUSI contributor Vic Bajaj. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in and talking about this because, you know, we heard about it in both of the president's State of the Union speeches. We saw one of the people that have been a beneficiary of this First Step Act. So first of all, give us an overview of it.
Well, this is actually a shining trophy for the United States of America. Some have called this the most pivotal legal change in the criminal justice system in the 21st century. One thing to note is, despite all the fighting that we hear about, we talk about, and we listen to daily, this act, the First Step Act, received bipartisan support. So both on the left and the right and everyone in between felt it was a correct thing to do. What it's designed to do, Ginger, is take extraordinarily exorbitant sentences and make them a little more reasonable. And what we mean by that is some individuals were sentenced to life terms as young people, having only suffered nonviolent prior offenses. So the beneficiaries of the First Step Act would be those who have nonviolent criminal histories that had been subject to the mandatory sentencing guidelines earlier.
Give us a for example.
Okay, that's great. So let's bring it down to what may happen in today's world. Let's say the state of Oklahoma has draconian or tough sentences for possession for marijuana. Let's say California doesn't. So an individual who has a possession for marijuana for sale in Oklahoma may be sentenced to 2 years in prison on the first-time offense. Not rare over there. Now in California, that same individual would now suffer, after Proposition 64, a misdemeanor and would not go to custody in all likelihood. So the same conduct in different states makes the power and the force of that prior, once you're now looking at a federal case, so disproportionate. In other words, the individual who served over 1 year and 1 month would now be subject to a mandatory minimum and extraordinarily high sentences. The individual who did the exact same act in a different jurisdiction, perhaps a more affluent jurisdiction or area, who did not suffer actual custody time for it, would not now be penalized under the federal code. So the difference is, it's really an effort to address disproportionate sentences based upon race.
Now, how does this fall under the president's umbrella of being tough on crime?
Well, it actually mirrors and it parallels that proposition very clearly. Being tough on crime, I believe, means being tough on the right crimes. Now, I always encourage our viewers every chance I can to go down to federal court and state court. They're public areas. Behave yourself and just watch what happens in court. And you'll see the marked difference between criminals who are charged and have admitted guilt to serious violent offenses, who may be parts of an organized crime group or drug trafficking organization, and those who may be subject to the same offense, the same conduct, trafficking in narcotics, for instance, who may have never had any indication or involvement with criminal history before. What the First Step Act tries to do is separate the individuals who can actually cause harm, physical harm, or threaten harm upon other citizens or non-citizens, and separate those individuals and say, hey, that slap on the wrist has to mean something, versus an individual who has merely a drug trafficking offense without a violent history and no violence involved in the new crime.
So if this is the first step in criminal justice reform, what would be the next step?
Well, there actually was a second chance, Second Step Act. And what that did earlier in 2008, when that was penned into legislation, that said, well, when we receive the people who are being released from prison, let's give them some programs to help them out. Well, the reason why the administration now calls it the First Step Act is the damage is done when you've lost so many precious years of your life receiving a disproportionate sentence. So why address it in the second chance if we can knock it out in the First Step Act?
Definitely some layers, but it sounds like you give the First Step Act a A+ review.
I absolutely do, and I think it's going to do the right thing.
All right, Vic, thank you for coming in,
My
giving
pleasure.
us the bottom line.
Thank you.